Lena was spending her Saturday the same way she did most weekends, sitting behind the old piano at the community center near her home. The center was not fancy at all. The walls were covered with posters from past charity events, the paint on the doors was a little chipped, and the floor always smelled like disinfectant and the lemon cleaner that the janitor used every morning. But Lena liked it. She liked that it felt honest and real. People came here to learn, to talk, to feel less alone. That mattered to her more than shiny buildings or perfect rooms. Lena had been playing piano since she was a kid. She was 16 now, and she knew more than just simple songs. She could play pieces that made people stop and stare. But she never bragged. She liked the piano because it calmed her. When she played, her worries seemed to pause for a moment. Her heart felt softer. It was like she could breathe better when her fingers touched the keys. Volunteering was something she chose to do. Her parents never forced her. They were supportive, and they liked that she was learning how to help others. Every Saturday, she gave free time to the center. Sometimes she played music for events. Sometimes she helped little kids find their rhythm. Sometimes she just practiced while people passed by, listening from the hallway like it was a small private concert. The community center had a routine. The mornings were always quiet. A few older people came in for coffee and a chat. Some parents brought their kids for art class. The afternoon was when more people arrived. The piano room was in the corner, near a set of windows that looked out onto the street. The sunlight always fell across the piano keys like a spotlight, making the room feel special even though it was so plain. On this particular afternoon, the sound of children laughing echoed from the hallway. It was nothing new, but today Lena felt extra peaceful. She played a gentle tune, something simple to warm up her hands. The melody floated out into the hallway and a couple of people peeked in before continuing on their way. Lena smiled to herself. She never played to impress. She just liked being part of the noise that made the center feel alive. While she played, the coordinator of the center, a middle-aged woman named Rita, entered the room. Rita always walked like she had a mission, like her shoes might catch fire if she didn't keep moving. But she had a kind smile and she treated everyone with respect, no matter their age or background. She waited politely for Lena to finish the tune before she spoke. "Lena," she said, "I have someone I'd like you to meet." Lena straightened up on the piano bench. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and nodded. "Sure. Who is it?" Rita motioned toward the doorway, and an older woman stepped inside. The woman had soft white hair and warm eyes that looked like they had seen both joy and sadness. She carried a handbag that seemed a little too heavy for her small frame. Her hands trembled slightly, not enough to worry anyone, but enough to notice. "This is Mrs. Hawthorne," Rita explained. "She joined the center recently. She used to play piano a long time ago. She asked if someone could help her remember a song she used to love." Mrs. Hawthorne smiled politely, almost shyly, like she wasn't sure she should be there. Lena stood and gave a small bow of the head, the way she always did when meeting someone new. "Nice to meet you," she said gently. "I'd be happy to try and help. What song are you thinking about?" The older woman hesitated before speaking, as if choosing her words carefully. "It's just a simple tune," she said in a quiet voice. "It's not something fancy or famous. My sister and I used to play it when we were girls. It was the first song we learned. I can't quite remember the name, but I still remember how it made me feel." Lena's heart softened a little at that. She didn't know why, but the idea of music holding memories like that made her want to help even more. "If you hum it," she offered, "maybe I can figure out the notes." Mrs. Hawthorne looked surprised, then relieved. "Oh, that would be very kind," she said, and she sat slowly beside the piano. The piano bench was big enough for two, but Lena scooted over a little to give her space. Mrs. Hawthorne placed her handbag carefully on the floor and folded her hands in her lap. She hummed a soft melody, unsure at first, but then with growing confidence. It wasn't perfect, but Lena recognized the pattern. Lena's fingers touched the keys, and she played back the hummed notes, adjusting them gently until the melody sounded right. Mrs. Hawthorne gasped quietly as the tune took shape. Her hand flew to her chest, overwhelmed not in a dramatic way, but like someone who has just seen a friend they thought they lost. "Yes," she whispered. "That's it. That's exactly it. I can't believe you found it so quickly." Lena felt a little shy at the compliment. "I'm glad I could help," she said. "Would you like me to play it slowly so you can listen? Or would you like to try playing it with me?" Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes widened. "Oh, I don't know if I could. It's been so many years. My fingers don't move the way they used to." Lena shook her head gently. "That's okay. We can take it slow. No pressure. I'll guide you through the keys if you want." The older woman hesitated, then nodded. "All right," she said softly. "Let's try." They sat side by side, and Lena pressed each key one by one, explaining the notes in simple terms. She didn't lecture or talk like a teacher. She talked like a friend. Mrs. Hawthorne placed her fingers on the keys, her hands shaking just a little. She missed some notes, but Lena never flinched or corrected harshly. She smiled and encouraged her, making sure the moment felt safe and warm. The tune began to form, not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. Every mistake was just part of the process. Every wrong note was met with patience. The community center felt quieter for a moment, like even the building was listening. When they finished, Mrs. Hawthorne looked emotional, but in a peaceful way. Lena could tell that the music had unlocked something inside her. A memory, a feeling, a piece of her past that she thought she had lost. "You play beautifully," Mrs. Hawthorne said, looking at Lena with admiration that felt real, not exaggerated. "Thank you," Lena replied, her cheeks warm. "But today wasn't about me. You did great. Really." Mrs. Hawthorne smiled, and it was the kind of smile that showed more than happiness. It showed trust and gratitude. "I'm glad I came today," she said. "I've been nervous about joining the center. I thought I might not fit in. But you've made me feel welcome." Lena felt proud, but she stayed humble. "Everyone fits in here," she said. "We're all learning something. We're all starting somewhere." Rita, who had been standing quietly in the corner watching, finally spoke up. "Lena has that effect on people," she said. "She makes them feel seen and heard." Lena blushed. Compliments always made her a little embarrassed, but she didn't dislike them. She just didn't know how to take them sometimes. Mrs. Hawthorne stood up slowly. "Thank you," she said again. "Maybe, if it's not too much trouble, could I come back next week? Maybe we could try again." Lena nodded without hesitation. "Of course, I'd like that." Mrs. Hawthorne picked up her handbag and walked toward the door. She paused for a moment and looked back at Lena, as if trying to memorize her face. Then she left the room, leaving behind a silence that felt full rather than empty. Lena sat at the piano again and played the tune one more time. She didn't know why, but she felt lighter, like something special had just happened, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. The day continued like normal. More people came and went. Some asked her to play something cheerful. Some just waved hello as they passed by. But Lena knew that something had changed. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a movie where everything suddenly shifts. It was quieter than that. Like the start of a story that didn't know it was a story yet. She didn't realize that the simple choice to help someone, the simple kindness of sharing music, would matter so much one day. She didn't know that something unimaginable was waiting in the future. She was just being herself, just doing what felt right. And sometimes that's where the most unexpected paths begin. She stayed until the sun began to set, the light turning golden through the windows. When she finally closed the piano and packed her things to go home, she felt hopeful. Like maybe next Saturday would be even better. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet afternoon was the start of something that would change her life in ways she never could have predicted. The next Saturday, Lena arrived at the community center earlier than usual. She didn't know exactly why she felt a little nervous, but something inside her hoped that Mrs. Hawthorne would return. She told herself not to expect anything. Maybe the older woman had changed her mind. Maybe she wouldn't show up again. After all, not everyone finds the courage to return to something they once loved. Sometimes life gets in the way. Still, Lena felt an excitement she couldn't fully explain. The piano keys felt cold under her fingers, like they hadn't been touched since she left. She pressed each note slowly, warming up her hands. The room smelled like coffee and window cleaner. The sunlight glowed against the floor, drawing soft shapes across the tiles. It was a normal day in every way, yet Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. She played a gentle tune to calm her nerves. As she played, she kept glancing at the entrance, hoping to see a familiar silhouette there. She reminded herself not to stare, so she tried to focus on the music instead. Each note floated through the room like a soft greeting for anyone who might walk in. More volunteers began to arrive. Parents passed by with their children. The art instructor waved as she walked down the hallway, arms full of paintbrushes and canvas boards. The usual noise of laughter, chatter, and moving chairs filled the air. But Lena's ears kept listening for one voice in particular. Nearly an hour went by. Still no sign. Lena tried to concentrate, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about how much courage it must have taken for Mrs. Hawthorne to sit down at the piano last week. Maybe it was too soon to expect her to come back. Maybe expecting anything at all was unfair. She was just about to start another warm-up when she heard the soft sound of shoes shuffling in the hallway. Lena turned slightly and saw a shape moving closer. It was small, slow, and careful. Her heart lifted. Mrs. Hawthorne stepped into the room, wearing a light blue coat and carrying a notebook under her arm. She smiled shyly when she saw Lena. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle but clearer than last time. Lena's face lit up. "Good morning. I'm really glad you came." Mrs. Hawthorne walked over slowly. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I was nervous. I thought maybe you would think I wasn't trying hard enough. But then I remembered how patient you were. So I decided to try again." "You don't have to worry," Lena replied. "I'm here to help, not to judge." The older woman sat on the bench beside her, placing the notebook in her lap. "I brought something," she said with a small laugh. "I tried writing down what I remembered from the tune. It's not sheet music exactly, just little notes to myself. I wasn't sure if it would help or confuse you." Lena opened the notebook carefully. Inside were pages filled with messy handwriting. Musical terms spelled halfway correctly, arrows pointing to little sketches of piano keys, and short sentences like, "The higher part goes like this," or "sounds like springtime." It was disorganized, but it was full of emotion. "It's perfect," Lena said, and she meant it. "It shows how much the song means to you." Mrs. Hawthorne took a breath, visibly relieved. "Thank you. Sometimes I feel silly, like I'm too old to be doing this." Lena shook her head. "You can never be too old for music." They moved closer to the piano. Lena placed her fingers on the keys, while Mrs. Hawthorne lifted her hands but hesitated before putting them in place. Her fingers hovered, unsure. Lena noticed and gently talked her through where to place them. "We'll start slowly," Lena said. "It's not a race. Think of it like telling a story one word at a time." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded. She pressed the first note. Came out a little too soft, but it was the right note. Her eyes lit up like a small spark had awakened inside. "That's it," Lena said softly. "Try the next one." The older woman pressed another key. This one wavered, but it still held the tune. Slowly, they moved along the melody. It was clumsy at first, with long pauses between notes, but every right sound felt like a victory. As they practiced, people occasionally passed the open door and peeked in, curious. No one interrupted. Something about the moment felt too delicate to break. It was like watching a seed try to grow in real time. You wouldn't want to step on it. Mrs. Hawthorne's hands began to tremble after a while. She stopped and sighed, frustrated. "My fingers argue with me," she said, trying to laugh it off even though Lena could hear the sadness behind the joke. "They're just waking up," Lena said kindly. "Give them time. Muscles remember things, but they remember better when we're patient with them." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded. She tried again. The tremor eased slightly as she focused on her breathing. Her shoulders relaxed. After some time, Rita entered the room holding 2 cups of warm tea. She handed one to Mrs. Hawthorne and one to Lena. Thought you could use a break, she said with a smile. You two look like you're working hard. Mrs. Hawthorne accepted the cup gratefully. Thank you. I feel like I've run a marathon. And all I did was play 8 notes. That's 8 more notes than last week, Lena said. Rita put her hands on her hips. Progress is progress, she added. No matter how small. Mrs. Hawthorne sipped her tea slowly. She stared at the piano keys like they were both familiar and foreign. I used to sit for hours at a piano when I was young, she said quietly. My sister and I would take turns. She was better than I was, more talented. She always said I could catch up if I stopped worrying. But I never really stopped worrying. Lena didn't know what to say at first. She didn't want to interrupt the memory. She just listened, giving space for the older woman to share as much or as little as she wanted. My sister passed away a few years ago, Mrs. Hawthorne continued. I haven't touched a piano since. It hurt too much. Like sitting at the keys without her beside me meant admitting she was truly gone. Lena rested her hands in her lap. I'm sorry, she said softly. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to fix anything. She just acknowledged the pain with respect. Mrs. Hawthorne nodded. I've learned something, though. Avoiding music didn't make the loss smaller. It just made my world quieter. And not in a good way. There was silence for a moment. A kind of silence that didn't feel heavy or awkward. Felt honest. Finally, Lena spoke. Maybe the music isn't about replacing the past. Maybe it's about carrying it forward in your own way. Mrs. Hawthorne blinked, surprised. Not because the words were complex, but because they felt true. Maybe so, she whispered. They returned to the piano. This time, Lena played the melody first slowly, almost like telling a story. Then she nodded for Mrs. Hawthorne to try again. The older woman took a breath and placed her fingers on the keys. She played, still imperfect, still hesitant, but with more heart than before. Halfway through the tune, something happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't magic. But it was meaningful. Mrs. Hawthorne hit a sequence of notes correctly, one after another, her fingers moving without second-guessing themselves. When she reached the end of that phrase, she gasped softly, astonished, and turned to Lena like she needed someone else to confirm that it actually happened. You did that, Lena said with a proud smile. Not me. You. Mrs. Hawthorne covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears. Not painful tears. Tears that come from remembering what it feels like to be capable. I thought that part was gone forever, she said. It wasn't, Lena replied. It was just waiting. The lesson continued for nearly an hour. And although they worked hard, it never felt forced. They shared small stories and small laughs between the music. There was no pressure to be perfect, just room to learn. When their time was up, Mrs. Hawthorne closed her notebook. She stood up slowly and looked at Lena with a gratitude that didn't need big speeches. Would it be all right, she asked, if we made this a routine? Every Saturday, if you're willing. I don't want to be a burden, but I think I want to keep going. You're not a burden, Lena said. I'd really like that. Mrs. Hawthorne exhaled, relieved. Then I'll see you next week. As she began to leave, Lena spoke again. Wait. Mrs. Hawthorne turned back. Lena reached down and handed her a small piece of paper. On it, Lena had written a few notes from the song, simplified and cleaned up, something Mrs. Hawthorne could practice at home without feeling overwhelmed. For when you feel like trying during the week, Lena explained. Mrs. Hawthorne held the paper like it was something precious. Thank you, she said. This means more than you know. After she left, Lena sat alone at the piano and stared at the keys. She felt a warmth inside her, something like purpose. Helping someone wasn't new to her, but this felt different. Like she wasn't just helping someone learn music. She was helping them find a piece of themselves again. She touched the keys lightly, playing a variation of the melody they worked on. A small variation like a new beginning. She didn't know what the future held, but she was starting to understand that kindness has echoes. You don't always see where they reach, but they travel. They matter. And so, the second week ended. not with applause or celebration, but with something quieter and more lasting. Two people connected by music, learning to trust the notes again. And in that quiet corner of the community center, something was beginning. Something no one could predict. The next week moved slowly for Lena. School days felt longer than usual. Homework piled up. Friends chatted around her, but her mind often drifted back to the community center, to the piano, and to the way Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes lit up when she played those correct notes. It wasn't that she didn't care about school or the people around her. She did, but something new had taken root in her thoughts, something warm and meaningful. It made everything else feel a little softer. By Thursday, she found herself humming the melody in class without realizing it. A classmate glanced over and smiled, asking what song it was. Lena didn't have an exact answer. She didn't know the name. It wasn't a famous piece. It was just something personal, something that belonged to moments shared at the piano bench. At home, she practiced with extra care. She imagined how she could teach the next small section. She played the melody at different speeds, wondering which tempo would feel less overwhelming for the older woman. She even tried recording the notes on her phone, just in case Mrs. Hawthorne wanted something to listen to during the week. She didn't know if she would want it, but she wanted to be prepared. Saturday arrived with cloudy skies and a soft drizzle. Lena tucked her music notebook into her backpack. She wore her warm jacket and held her umbrella tightly as she walked to the community center. The rain made the streets look like they were glowing. Car headlights reflected off the puddles like small stars on the ground. Despite the gloomy weather, Lena felt hopeful. When she arrived, the center was quieter than usual. Rainy days always had fewer visitors. The hallways echoed a little more. The sound of footsteps bounced from wall to wall. She set her backpack down in the piano room and warmed her hands by rubbing them together. She played a few notes just to break the silence. They echoed back at her, gentle and patient. She told herself not to worry if Mrs. Hawthorne didn't come. Maybe the rain made it difficult for her to travel. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. Maybe she was tired. She tried to manage her expectations, but her heart beat faster every time she heard footsteps outside the doorway. A few minutes passed, then a few more. Lena played to distract herself, choosing a calm tune so her nerves wouldn't take over. The music filled the room like a conversation she was having with herself. Finally, a familiar voice floated in from the hallway. "I hope I'm not late," the voice said, a little breathless. Lena turned around quickly. Standing in the doorway, umbrella in one hand and a plastic bag in the other, was Mrs. Hawthorne. Her coat was damp around the shoulders, and raindrops sprinkled her hair like tiny crystals, but she was smiling. "You made it," Lena said with relief. "Are you okay? The weather's pretty rough." "Oh, I'm fine," the older woman said, taking a careful step inside. "My bus was delayed, and then I walked slower than usual. But I didn't want to miss today. I brought something." She held up the plastic bag like a mystery. Lena tilted her head, curious. Mrs. Hawthorne opened the bag and took out 2 pastries wrapped in wax paper. "I stopped by a bakery near my home," she said. "I thought we could share a snack during a break, if that's all right with you." Lena's eyes widened a little. She wasn't used to people bringing things for her. "That's really kind of you," she said. "Thank you." They set the pastries aside for later and settled at the piano. The older woman opened her notebook, and Lena noticed new pages added to it. More scribbles, more sketches of keys, more little arrows and notes like, "Don't rush here," and "Listen to the feeling, not just the sound." "You worked on this?" Lena said, impressed. Mrs. Hawthorne nodded. "Only a little. I didn't want to lose what we practiced. I tried to memorize the first section. My neighbors probably think I'm terrible, but I tried not to worry about that." "You don't have to worry about anyone else," Lena said gently. "They don't get to decide what you can or can't enjoy." Mrs. Hawthorne took a breath and placed her fingers on the keys. "Then let's begin." The first notes came out shaky, but they were correct. She paused, exhaled, then continued. Lena counted softly under her breath when needed, giving subtle guidance without taking over. When the older woman faltered, Lena played just a couple of notes to remind her, then let her try again. Progress wasn't perfect, but it was progress. At one point, Mrs. Hawthorne stopped and shook her head. "I'm thinking too much," she said. "My mind gets ahead of my hands." "That happens to me too," Lena admitted. "Sometimes I want to rush to the end before I even start. But maybe music isn't about getting to the end. Maybe it's about staying with each moment while we're in it." Mrs. Hawthorne looked at her, surprised again by how someone so young could speak with so much clarity. "You're wiser than you realize," she said softly. Lena shrugged. "I don't feel wise. I just know how it feels to want something to matter." They kept practicing. Slowly, patiently. Rain tapped the windows like a soft rhythm in the background. At times, the melody blended with the rain, and the room felt suspended between worlds. The one outside, wet and gray, and the one inside, warm and learning and full of small victories. After nearly half an hour, Lena suggested they take a break. They unwrapped the pastries and sat facing each other. The pastries were sweet and flaky, filled with apple. The taste reminded Lena of autumn festivals, of warm kitchens, of comfort. Mrs. Hawthorne watched her reaction and smiled. "I used to bake," she said, "before my hands started shaking more. Wasn't the best baker in the world, but I liked sharing food. It made me feel connected to people." "You still are connected," Lena said. "Your kindness shows up in different forms now." The words seemed to land gently, like a soft blanket placed around the older woman's shoulders. She sipped her tea that she brought in a thermos and looked around the room. "This place used to scare me," she admitted. "Coming here, I thought it would remind me of everything I'd lost. Now I realize it's showing me what I still have." Lena nodded. "I'm glad you stayed long enough to see that." They returned to the piano, and Lena decided to try something new. She played a harmony beneath the main melody. It was subtle, a small line of notes that filled the empty spaces. Mrs. Hawthorne listened with wide eyes. "That's beautiful," she said. "I didn't know the song could sound like that." "It's the same song," Lena said, "just with a new layer. Sometimes music grows when we do." They practiced again, and slowly the two melodies, hers and Lena's, began to fit together. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel like a partnership rather than a lesson. At one moment, Mrs. Hawthorne pressed the wrong key. The sound clashed loudly, interrupting the rhythm. She winced. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "You don't have to apologize," Lena replied. "Mistakes are part of the song too. They teach us where to go next." Mrs. Hawthorne took that in, then nodded. As they continued playing, Rita appeared in the doorway. She listened for a bit before speaking. "I've noticed something," she said with a grin. "The music sounds fuller in here these days." Mrs. Hawthorne blushed a little. "I'm learning," she said shyly. "You're doing more than that," Rita replied. "You're sharing." After Rita left, Lena leaned closer and said, "She's right. You're bringing something to this room that wasn't here before." Mrs. Hawthorne's lips trembled slightly, not from sadness but from emotion she didn't know how to hold. "I haven't felt like I was bringing anything to the world for a long time," she said. "I thought I was only taking up space. But these lessons, they make me feel like I'm giving something back." "You are," Lena said. "You're giving courage. Do you know what it takes for someone to start again after years? A lot. And seeing you do it, it inspires me." The older woman looked at her in awe. "Inspires you? But I'm learning from you." "And I'm learning from you," Lena replied. "Teaching isn't only one direction. You're reminding me that music is more than notes. It's connection." Mrs. Hawthorne placed her hand gently on the keys. "Then I suppose we're both students today," she said. They laughed quietly together. Then they played again. The lesson lasted longer than usual. When Mrs. Hawthorne stood to leave, she looked steadier than when she arrived. Not physically, her balance was still careful, but emotionally. There was a strength in her posture that hadn't been there before, a belief that maybe she wasn't done growing. Before she left, she turned to Lena and said, "Thank you, not just for the music, for seeing me, Lena swallowed the lump in her throat. "Thank you for trusting me." Mrs. Hawthorne walked out into the rain, this time holding her umbrella confidently. She paused at the entrance, looked back, and waved. Lena waved too. When the door closed, the room felt full. Not crowded, not noisy, just full. The echo of their playing lingered in the air like a gentle reminder that some moments stay even when the people leave. Lena sat back at the piano and rested her hands in her lap. She didn't know exactly what this journey would become. She didn't know where it was going. But she knew she wanted to follow it. She wanted to show up every Saturday. She wanted to keep learning alongside the woman who had come to the center looking for a memory and found a beginning instead. She touched the keys and played the melody alone, but it didn't feel like playing alone anymore. In her mind, she could hear the older woman's hesitant, hopeful notes joining her. The harmony lived in the room, soft and patient, like something waiting to bloom. Outside, the rain eased. Inside, the music continued. And somewhere in the future, something unexpected was already moving toward her. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the way music travels. Quietly, steadily, note by note, until it finally arrives in the heart of the one who needs it most. The following Saturday came with a brightness that made everything feel lighter. The sky was clear for the first time in days, as if the weather had been waiting too. Lena woke up early, earlier than she needed to. She lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how something so small, just 1 hour a week, could take up so much space in her heart. Not in a heavy way, but in a way that made her feel awake. She got ready like she always did, but slower. She braided her hair neatly and packed her notebook, her pencils, and a small recording device in case it might help later. She even carried a small stack of blank sheet music papers. She wasn't sure why. It just felt right to be ready for whatever the day might bring. As she walked to the community center, the morning air smelled like new beginnings. Fresh grass, warm sunlight, the hum of weekend traffic. Everything felt ordinary, yet not. It reminded her of the way life sometimes changes, not suddenly, but through small steps that eventually look like a journey when you turn back. At the center, she waved at Rita, who was in the middle of arranging flyers on a bulletin board. Rita waved back enthusiastically, as if Saturday mornings depended on seeing Lena walk through the door. "She's already in the piano room," Rita called out. "Said she wanted to warm up. Can you believe it? Practicing before her lesson." Lena blinked. "She came early?" "She did," Rita said. She looked nervous, but excited, like someone waiting for a letter they already know the answer to. Lena smiled and headed to the piano room. She paused before entering. Through the half-open door, she could hear a melody, slow, uneven, but recognizable. The notes sounded like a story someone was trying to remember. Mrs. Hawthorne sat at the piano, back straight, eyes focused on the keys. Her hands trembled, but less than before. She pressed each key carefully, like someone stepping on stones across a river. Not afraid of falling, as she once was, but determined to cross. Lena didn't want to interrupt. She leaned against the doorframe, listening. The tune was not perfect. Wrong notes popped up here and there, scattered like little reminders that learning is never a straight line. But there was heart. More heart than the first time. The music had shape now. It had breath. When Mrs. Hawthorne reached the end of the phrase, she sighed, then looked up. She startled slightly when she saw Lena watching. "Oh," she said, flustered. "I didn't hear you come in." "I didn't want to disturb you," Lena replied, stepping inside. "You sounded wonderful." Mrs. Hawthorne laughed softly. "Wonderful might be a stretch, but I'm trying." "And it shows," Lena said, placing her bag down. "Trying is what music needs most. The rest comes after." The older woman closed her notebook and looked at Lena, a little shy but proud. "This week, I practiced every morning, just for a few minutes, sometimes only 5. But I did it." Lena's heart warmed. 5 minutes is enough to change a habit," she said gently. "Even 2 minutes can be a beginning." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded and pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. I even wrote down a memory that came back to me. I wasn't sure if I should show you. It feels personal. But the music helped me remember." She hesitated, then handed the paper over. Lena took it carefully. The handwriting was shaky but readable. It told of two young girls, sisters, sitting at a dusty upright piano in their childhood home. Their father had bought the piano secondhand from a neighbor. The girls didn't know much then, just that pressing keys made something happen, something that felt bigger than their small living room. The melody they learned wasn't from a book. It was something their sister made up. A tune about spring, new beginnings, and the way sunlight fell through the window like music itself. Lena folded the paper back gently. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you for trusting me with it." Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes glistened, but she blinked the emotion away. "I thought if I remembered where the song came from, it might help me play it again. I'm not sure if it worked, but it felt like a step." "It did work," Lena said. "Even if the music isn't perfect, the memory is. And the memory is where the music begins." Mrs. Hawthorne took a deep breath. "I hope so." They sat at the piano together. This time, Lena proposed something new. "What if today," Lena said, "instead of rushing to play the full melody, we break it into emotions? Not notes, not measures, just feelings." Mrs. Hawthorne furrowed her brow. "Feelings?" Lena nodded. "For example, the beginning feels like waking up. The middle feels like reaching. The end feels like letting go. What if you play with that in mind? Don't worry about mistakes. Just focus on what it's supposed to feel like." Mrs. Hawthorne considered this. "I've never thought about music that way." "Try it," Lena encouraged. Mrs. Hawthorne placed her fingers on the keys again. The first notes came out slowly, like someone opening a curtain to let in light. Lena didn't guide her this time. She just listened. The melody moved awkwardly at first, stumbling like childhood memories learning how to walk again. But gradually the sound changed. The notes found a rhythm. They formed something more than music, they formed connection. Halfway through, Mrs. Hawthorne missed a key entirely. The sound clanged, sharp and wrong. She froze, shoulders tensing. Lena spoke softly. "Keep going. Mistakes are pauses, not endings." Mrs. Hawthorne exhaled and continued. Her hands found their place again. When she reached the end, her shoulders dropped, and she sat back, exhausted but satisfied. "That felt different," she said. "It sounded different," Lena replied. "In a good way, like you were speaking." They practiced like this for a while. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was like the breath between notes, needed, meaningful. At one point, Mrs. Hawthorne asked a question that caught Lena off guard. "Do you ever feel like music understands you more than people do?" she asked. Lena thought about it. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I think music is made of people too. Every melody comes from someone trying to say something they couldn't with words. So maybe music is just people, speaking differently." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded slowly. "I like that." Rita entered the room with another cup of tea a little later. She leaned against the door, watching the two at the piano. "You know," Rita said, "I've seen many volunteers come through here, many students, many teachers, but I don't think I've seen anyone make this room feel the way you two do." Mrs. Hawthorne laughed, embarrassed. "We're just trying not to break the piano." "The piano is fine," Rita said, "but something tells me it's been waiting for you both." After Rita left, Lena turned to Mrs. Hawthorne. "I want to teach you something else today," she said. "If you're up for it." Mrs. Hawthorne nodded. "I am." Lena placed her hands on the keys and began to show her how to read a small section of simplified sheet music. Not the whole piece, just a few notes, enough to plant a seed. Mrs. Hawthorne struggled at first, trying to balance remembering the tune with understanding the symbols. Lena kept her voice soft, her instructions simple. She never rushed. She never raised her voice. She never let the moment feel like a test. Minutes turned into an hour. The sun shifted across the windows. At one point, Mrs. Hawthorne finally read a measure without hesitation. When she did, She gasped again, as if remembering that progress can surprise you. I did it, she whispered. You did, Lena said. And you will again. When their lesson ended, Mrs. Hawthorne stood up slowly. She seemed taller somehow, not physically but in presence. Before leaving, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in tissue paper. This is for you, she said, handing it to Lena. Lena unfolded the tissue. Inside was a tiny silver music charm shaped like a treble clef. It wasn't expensive. The metal was slightly worn. The shine faded. But it was beautiful. It belonged to my sister, Mrs. Hawthorne said quietly. She gave it to me the day we learned that melody. I want you to have it. You remind me of her. Not because you look like her, but because you make music feel like home. Lena's throat tightened. I can't accept this, she said. It's too special. Mrs. Hawthorne gently closed Lena's hand around the charm. Some things are meant to find new hands, she said. Their eyes met. No tears fell, but the emotion was there, held carefully, like a note sustained just long enough to matter. Lena whispered, Thank you. Mrs. Hawthorne smiled. I'll see you next week. She left the room. Lena stayed behind, sitting at the piano, the charm resting in her palm like a heartbeat. She wasn't sure why, but she felt like the world had tilted just slightly, like something important had shifted. She placed the charm on the piano, touched the keys, and played the melody. It sounded warmer now, not just like a tune someone remembered, but like a tune that was learning how to live again. Outside the room, unseen, Rita paused in the hallway, her hand over her heart. She didn't know the full story. She didn't need to. She could feel it. The kind of feeling that tells you something meaningful is happening, even if you don't know why. Lena didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what was coming, but she felt deep down that music was leading her somewhere. Somewhere unexpected. Somewhere true. And with every week that passed, the melody would grow. The connection would deepen. And the kindness she gave so freely would ripple in ways she could never imagine. Because sometimes, all it takes is one simple tune to start opening doors you didn't know were waiting. The days before the next Saturday felt different for Lena, as if someone had quietly turned up the brightness in her life. Every moment at school, every step on her walk home, every meal, every conversation. It all carried the tune somewhere in the back of her mind. She found herself tapping rhythms on her desk, humming soft harmonies while doing chores, even doodling piano keys in the margins of her notebook. The small silver charm, shaped like a treble clef, stayed in her jacket pocket all week. Sometimes she reached in just to touch it, feeling the cool metal against her fingers. It reminded her that something meaningful was unfolding. Not a big story the world would talk about, not something loud or flashy, just something real, something human. By Wednesday, Lena found the courage to show her parents the charm. They listened quietly as she told the story. They didn't interrupt. They didn't ask for details she didn't want to share. Her father simply nodded and said, It sounds like you're making a difference. Her mother smiled and hugged her, whispering, Sometimes life rewards the softest actions. Those words stayed with Lena. Saturday arrived warmer than it should have for the season. Lena walked to the community center with a sense of purpose. She didn't rush. She didn't slow down. She just moved forward, step by step, holding a bag with something inside. A surprise she'd spent all week preparing. When she entered the center, Rita greeted her with raised eyebrows and a teasing grin. Look at you, Rita said. You're glowing like a sunrise. Does music make everyone this bright or just you? Lena laughed, embarrassed but not upset. Maybe a little of both, she answered. Rita leaned closer. She's in the room already. She was asking for you. I think she's nervous because she didn't want to start without you. Lena felt her stomach flutter. Then I shouldn't keep her waiting. She walked to the piano room. The door was half open again, just like many times before. She stepped inside gently. Mrs. Hawthorne was sitting on the piano bench, her notebook open, her fingers stretching slowly, warming up. She looked up when she heard Lena's footsteps and her face softened into a smile. There you are, she said with relief. I was worried I came too early. You're right on time, Lena assured. It's good to see you. They settled down at the bench, but before they began, Lena opened her bag and carefully pulled out what she had brought. A clean stack of simplified sheet music she had worked on all week. The melody was written out clearly, spaced perfectly for reading. Each measure had small notes beside it, gentle reminders like, breathe here, and listen before playing, and trust your fingers. I made this for you, Lena said, handing the papers over. Mrs. Hawthorne took them with both hands, her expression shifting from surprise to disbelief to gratitude. You wrote this. I adapted it, Lena explained. It's not complicated. I just wanted you to have a map. Not something strict, just something to guide you when I'm not here. Mrs. Hawthorne traced her finger over the lines of notes like someone reading a letter from an old friend. This is a gift I don't know how to thank you for, she whispered. You don't have to thank me, Lena replied. Learning with you has given me just as much. They began the lesson. The sheet music helped. The pauses between notes were fewer. The hesitation was still there, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was caution, like someone stepping carefully because they knew what mattered, not because they were unsure of themselves. Lena noticed that even the mistakes sounded different now. They didn't sound like failure. They sounded like someone reaching, learning, growing, like footsteps echoing down a hallway leading somewhere new. After a while, Lena tried something she hadn't tried before. What if today, she suggested, we try playing together, the full melody, from start to finish. You on the main tune, and I'll support with harmonies like last time. Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes widened. The whole song? Even the ending? Only if you want to, Lena added quickly. You're ready, but there's no pressure. The older woman took a moment. She looked down at her hands, then at the charm hanging now from a small chain around her wrist. She nodded slowly. I want to, she said. Even if I stumble, I want to try. They positioned themselves. Lena counted softly. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Mrs. Hawthorne began. The first notes floated gently, like they were testing the air. Lena entered with her harmony. Not loud, not dominant, just enough to be there, to be a safety net. It felt like two voices having a conversation without words. When Mrs. Hawthorne hesitated, Lena slowed with her. When she rushed, Lena steadying her tempo. The music adjusted, shifted, flexed without breaking. It wasn't perfect, but perfection was never the goal. When they reached the part that always frightened Mrs. Hawthorne, the section near the end where her fingers used to freeze, she closed her eyes just for a second and let her hands move. And they did. They moved across the keys. Not flawlessly, but bravely. A wrong note slipped in, but she did not stop. Her breath caught, but she kept going. Lena felt something inside her chest expand, like a door opening. When they reached the final note, the sound didn't just fade. It settled. The air in the room felt heavier, in a good way, like the melody had anchored itself to the space. Mrs. Hawthorne covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Not from sobs, but from relief, from release, from the surprise of her own ability. I played it, she whispered. I played it. All of it. You did, Lena said, her voice barely above a breath. You did. Mrs. Hawthorne let out a shaky laugh. I feel like I just climbed a mountain I've been standing at the bottom of for years. You didn't climb alone, Lena said gently. Mrs. Hawthorne reached over and squeezed her hand. No, she agreed. I didn't. Thank you. They took a break. Not because they were tired, but because the moment deserved space. They sat quietly, letting the accomplishments settle into their bones. A few minutes later, Rita appeared again, as if drawn by intuition. Everything all right? She asked. Mrs. Hawthorne looked at her, eyes shining. Better than all right, she said. I played my song. Rita clapped her hands together softly, not to make a scene but to honor the moment. I'm proud of you, she said. Mrs. Hawthorne smiled. I'm proud of me too. Those words hung in the air like music. After the break, Lena introduced something new, not to challenge but to expand. They practiced a slightly different ending to the melody, a variation. It wasn't part of the original, but Lena thought it might be interesting to see what happened when the song evolved. Mrs. Hawthorne tried it. She stumbled, laughed, tried again. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. That was enough. Near the end of the lesson, something unexpected happened. The door opened, and a small group of kids from the art room peeked inside. One of them, maybe 8 or 9 years old, asked shyly, "Can we listen?" They weren't loud. They weren't disruptive. They just looked curious. Mrs. Hawthorne froze, unsure. Lena looked at her. "Only if you want. We can close the door if you're uncomfortable." Mrs. Hawthorne took a breath. She looked at the children. She looked at Lena. Then something in her posture changed. Not dramatically, but enough. She nodded. "Yes," she said. "They can listen." The children entered quietly, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Rita stood in the doorway like a guardian, smiling. Lena and Mrs. Hawthorne played the melody again. This time, the music carried something new, confidence. Not the loud kind, the gentle kind, the kind that comes from facing something hard and choosing to move anyway. When they finished, the children clapped, small hands making small sounds that somehow felt big. Mrs. Hawthorne looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She just pressed her hand over her heart and bowed her head. Lena whispered, "You shared your music. That's a kind of bravery most people never find." Mrs. Hawthorne looked at her. "I didn't know I could be brave like this." "You just needed a place to try," Lena replied. The lesson ended with a hug. Not forced, not planned, just natural. Like a note resolving in the right place. As Mrs. Hawthorne left, she paused and looked back. "Next week," she said, "I want to learn how to play the harmony with you." Lena smiled. "We'll try, one note at a time." After she left, Lena sat at the piano again, the charm warm against her palm. Something was happening. Something good. Something that didn't need a label or a title or a plan. Just a melody. Just kindness. Just the beginning of a story she didn't realize she was writing with her actions. Her patience, her heart. She didn't know it yet, but she was growing too. Not just as a pianist, but as a person. And the world was quietly preparing to return what she was giving, in ways she could never predict. The lessons continued every Saturday, like the ticking of a clock that marked progress instead of time. Each week looked a little bit different now. Mrs. Hawthorne walked into the room with more confidence. She stretched her hands without being asked. She smiled before sitting down, not after. And Lena noticed every change, as if each improvement were a note added to the song they were building together. 3 weeks passed like that, steady and warm. The melody no longer belonged to just one of them. It had become something shared, like a language both were learning to speak. One Saturday, Lena arrived early to practice alone before their session. But she found Mrs. Hawthorne already there, sitting at the piano with a look that Lena couldn't read at first. Her eyes were focused on the keys, but her hands rested in her lap, still, unmoving. "Good morning," Lena said gently, placing her bag down. Mrs. Hawthorne looked up slowly. "Good morning," she replied, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take your practice time." "You're never taking something from me," Lena said. "We share this room." But something felt different. The air carried a quiet Lena couldn't name. Mrs. Hawthorne motioned to the bench. "Come, sit. I want to show you something." Lena sat down beside her. The older woman opened her notebook, flipping to a page near the back. The handwriting was shakier than usual, and there were fewer notes. Just a short line at the top. "For the days I can't be here." Lena's chest tightened. She stayed quiet, letting Mrs. Hawthorne explain. "I've been feeling more tired lately," the older woman said. "Not emotionally. Not because of the lessons. Those are the brightest part of my week." She paused. "But physically, I think my body is slowing down. The doctor says nothing dangerous right now. Just age. Just limitations. But I may need to rest more." Lena nodded slowly. "That's okay. We can go slower. Or we can meet every other week. Or we can do shorter lessons. Anything you need." Mrs. Hawthorne smiled, touched by her eagerness. Thank you, truly. But there's something else. She lifted a small envelope from her purse and handed it to Lena. Her name was written on the front in the same shaky handwriting. I wrote that last night, Mrs. Hawthorne said. Not because I'm going anywhere right now, but because I don't want to leave anything unsaid. Life has taught me that tomorrow isn't something we should assume. Lena looked down at the envelope, unsure if she should open it or wait. You can read it later, Mrs. Hawthorne said. Not now. Today should be for music. Lena placed the envelope gently in her lap and nodded. There was a moment of silence before Mrs. Hawthorne continued. Today, I don't want to practice the melody we've been working on. Lena blinked. You don't? No, she said. Today, I want you to teach me something new. Something that belongs to you, not me. A piece or a tune or even just a few bars of music that you love. I want to learn a part of you. Lena hesitated, surprised. She had always focused on supporting the older woman's journey. She had never thought to bring her own story into the music. Not like that. She took a slow breath. Okay, she said. I know what to teach. Lena pulled out a sheet of music she had never planned to share. It was a song she had written herself months ago, in a moment when she felt lost about her future. She had never played it for anyone else. It wasn't polished or perfect. It was just honest. A mix of hope and fear and something like prayer. She placed the sheet gently between them. Mrs. Hawthorne looked at the notes as if they were a map. It's beautiful, she said softly. You haven't even heard it, Lena said, almost laughing. I don't need to, Mrs. Hawthorne replied. I can tell when something is made from the heart. Lena played it once through. The melody was gentle, climbed and fell like footsteps on a hill. It paused in places where a breath was needed. It carried something fragile and strong at the same time. Mrs. Hawthorne listened with her eyes closed, her head tilting slightly with the music. When it ended, she opened her eyes, which looked shiny with emotion. That song, she said, is like someone opening a window. Lena swallowed. It's called Pathway. I named it after the feeling of not knowing where I'm going, but trusting that I'm moving anyway. Mrs. Hawthorne nodded. Let's learn it. And they did. They broke the song down piece by piece. Mrs. Hawthorne learned only the first 8 bars that day, but she played them with the same seriousness she had given to her original melody. Sometimes she paused, lost in thought. Sometimes she forgot to breathe and Lena reminded her. Sometimes she smiled at the places where the notes surprised her. At one point, she looked at Lena and said, You know, you are building a bridge with your music, a bridge that others can walk across. Lena didn't know what to say. Compliments like that always felt too big. But she held onto the words, placing them somewhere safe inside herself. The lesson ended earlier than usual. Mrs. Hawthorne's hands started shaking, and she admitted she needed rest. She packed her notebook away slowly, carefully. Before she left, she touched the piano keys once more, like saying goodbye to a friend even though she would see them again. At the door, she turned back. If I ever miss a week, she said, promise me you'll keep playing anyway. I promise, Lena whispered. And if I ever forget a note, Mrs. Hawthorne added, remind me that the music is still mine to find. I will, Lena said. Always. Mrs. Hawthorne nodded, satisfied. Then she left the room, walking slower than usual, but with her head held high. When she was gone, Lena sat alone at the piano, the envelope still in her lap. She stared at it but didn't open it yet. She wasn't ready. The air felt heavy with meaning. Lena played the melody they learned together, the original one, but she added the harmony from her own song. They blended, crossing paths, meeting in the middle. 2 melodies, 2 lives, 2 timelines finding a place to touch. After a few minutes, Rita entered quietly and sat beside Lena without speaking. She listened. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. When Lena finished, Rita placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. You're doing something here, Rita said. Something that can't be measured. Lena looked up. What if it ends? Everything ends. Rita said gently. But what we give doesn't. Keeps moving. Through people. Through memories. Through music. Lena nodded, tears sitting behind her eyes but not falling. She placed the envelope into her notebook, next to the sheet music she had shared. As she packed her things, she thought about what Mrs. Hawthorne had said, about being brave, about building bridges, about starting again. And she realized something. Helping someone else remember their music had helped her find her own. Outside, the sunlight was turning orange. The world was still moving, and somewhere in that movement, something quiet and powerful was growing. Not fame, not recognition, not some grand achievement, just connection. And connection, Lena knew now, was its own kind of inheritance. The next Saturday, Lena arrived at the community center with her usual quiet excitement. But something in the air felt different. Not bad, not dramatic, just different, like the pause before a song begins. She tried to ignore the feeling, telling herself that change didn't always mean loss. Sometimes it meant growth. She repeated that thought like a mantra as she walked the familiar hallway toward the piano room. She expected to see Mrs. Hawthorne sitting at the bench already, warming her fingers the way she had learned to do before every session. But the room was empty. The piano stood alone, the dust floating in the sunlight coming through the window. The silence seemed to wait for her, like a held breath. Lena placed her things down slowly. She sat at the piano and played a few notes, but they sounded too loud in the quiet room. She stopped and folded her hands in her lap. She told herself to be patient. Maybe Mrs. Hawthorne was just running late. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Lena checked the hallway, her heart ticking faster than usual. She saw Rita near the front desk, sorting mail into piles. Something in her expression made Lena pause. Rita looked up and smiled softly. Not the usual bright smile. A smaller one. Kind. Careful. Lena walked over, her steps slow and deliberate. Is everything okay? She asked. Rita hesitated, then reached for a small envelope from the stack. She held it gently, like something fragile. This came for you, she said. Delivered yesterday. Lena took it. Her name was written on the front in familiar handwriting. Shaky, careful, but full of heart. From Mrs. Hawthorne. Lena's pulse quickened. Is she all right? She asked, barely above a whisper. Rita inhaled, choosing her words with care. She called this morning. She said she wasn't feeling strong enough to come today. The doctor wants her to rest. She sounded calm. She said she hopes to return soon. Lena nodded, her throat tight. She wasn't surprised exactly. The last lesson had felt like a chapter closing, even though neither of them had said so out loud. Change had been coming like weather, slow, steady, unavoidable. She looked at the envelope again. She felt the weight of it. Not heavy, just present. Thank you, she whispered. Rita placed a hand on her shoulder for a moment. Read it when you're ready, she said. And remember, whatever it says, it doesn't erase what you've built together. Lena returned to the piano room. She sat on the bench, the envelope, resting on her knees. She ran her finger along the edge. She didn't open it yet. She let herself breathe first. When she finally slid her finger under the flap, the paper inside unfolded like something that had been waiting. The letter was short. My dear Lena, if you are reading this, it means I could not be there today. Please know it is not for lack of wanting. I wanted to be there more than I can say, but my body is tired, and I must listen to it. I did not want our lesson to end without leaving something with you. Not a burden, not a goodbye, just a truth. Because of you, I remembered that music is not about skill. It is about connection. You reminded me of a version of myself I thought I had lost. You made me feel capable again. That is a gift I never expected this late in life. I am resting now, but I promise I will try to return. If I cannot, please know that I will still be listening somewhere, somehow, and I will imagine you playing our melody. Keep teaching, keep learning, and keep your kindness. It is rare. It is powerful. It is your inheritance to the world. With gratitude, H. Lena read the letter twice, then 3 times. The words sank into her like ink into paper. They didn't break her. They didn't shatter anything. They just settled, heavy, meaningful, true. She folded the letter carefully and placed it next to the small charm in her pocket. The two pieces felt connected now like two notes in the same chord. She placed her hands on the keys. She played the melody they learned together. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. The music filled the room again, not with celebration or sadness, but with remembrance, with presence, with love in its quietest form. She added the harmony from her own song. The two melodies blended like they were meant to, and when the last note faded, she whispered into the stillness, "You're not gone, not from here." The following week, Lena returned again, and again. Sometimes she found the piano room empty. Sometimes she practiced alone. Sometimes she taught small children simple tunes. She started offering beginner lessons for free, just as she had done for Mrs. Hawthorne, but she did it with a new understanding. It wasn't about teaching piano. It was about inviting someone to find themselves again. Parents began to notice. "My daughter comes home happier," one said. "My son says you make the notes feel like stories," another added. Lena would smile shyly, unsure how to respond. She didn't feel like she was doing anything extraordinary. She was just passing on what she had learned. That music could be a bridge between hearts. One Saturday, as Lena packed her things to leave, Rita approached her. "There's someone who wants to speak with you," she said. A woman stepped forward. She was in her 40s, with gentle eyes and a familiar sadness. Lena didn't recognize her at first. "You must be Lena," the woman said. "I'm Mrs. Hawthorne's niece. She talks about you a lot." Lena swallowed hard. "Is she okay?" The woman smiled. Not a cheerful smile. Kind one. "She's resting more these days. She can't travel to the center anymore. But she asked me to bring something to you." She handed Lena a key and a folded piece of paper. Lena unfolded the note first. "The music room in my apartment building has an old upright piano. It doesn't get used much anymore. I spoke to the manager and arranged for the key to be yours. I want you to have another place to play, another place to teach, another room to fill with music. Think of it as our final duet. I open the door and you walk through it. With love." Lena stared at the key in her palm, felt heavier than metal should, like history, like trust. "She wanted you to know," the niece said softly, "that what you did for her made this world feel kinder. She said you gave her one more beginning. I think that's a beautiful thing to give someone." Lena nodded, tears warming her eyes but not falling. "Thank you," she whispered. The niece hugged her gently, then left. That evening, Lena walked to the apartment building. The manager greeted her kindly. He led her to a small room on the first floor. The door creaked when he unlocked it. Inside was an old upright piano, not perfect, not polished. The wood was scratched. Some keys were slightly yellowed. But when Lena sat and pressed a note, it rang out like a heartbeat. She placed the charm on top of the piano. Then the letter. Then she closed her eyes and played their song. She didn't play for applause. She didn't play for skill. She played for connection. Halfway through the melody, she felt something. Not a hand, not a voice, not a miracle, just a presence. Like someone sitting beside her in memory, in spirit, in music. She finished the song and let the silence hold it. In that silence, Lena understood something. Sometimes you meet a person for a season. Sometimes you meet them for a lesson. Sometimes you meet them for a song. Mrs. Hawthorne had been all three, and Lena, without realizing it, was becoming someone else's. The journey wasn't over. It was turning, opening, becoming, and the music was still going. Note by note, weeks passed, and Lena built a gentle routine around the new piano room in the apartment building. She still volunteered every Saturday at the community center, but now she also visited the music room during the weekdays, sometimes to practice, sometimes to think, sometimes just to sit in silence with the instrument, feeling its history in the wood beneath her fingertips. The room was small, but it felt safe. A warm yellow lamp stood in the corner. Dust sparkled in the sunlight during late afternoons. The piano bench creaked when she sat down, and Lena found comfort in its imperfect sound. Felt lived in. Felt honest. She began to bring her notebook there. She wrote short reflections. Ideas for lessons. Snippets of melodies that visited her mind like guests. Some stayed. Some floated away. She didn't force them. One day, as she sat tracing the charm with her thumb, she realized her hands didn't shake when she thought about the future anymore. She still didn't have everything figured out, but she wasn't afraid of that now. She felt like she was walking a path, even if she couldn't see every step ahead. A few residents in the building began to poke their heads into the music room, shyly asking if Lena could teach their children. They apologized for asking. They offered payment Lena didn't want to take. She always shook her head and said the same thing. Pass the kindness forward. That's enough. Soon, once a week turned into twice. Twice turned into 3 times. Lena found herself teaching short lessons to young beginners, each with their own reasons for being there. A girl who wanted to play because music calmed her anxiety. A boy whose parents had divorced and needed somewhere quiet to think. A teenager who thought music might make her feel less alone. Lena didn't advertise. She didn't plan. The lessons just found her. One afternoon, as a little boy named Jonah left the room, he paused at the door. "You make the piano feel like it's smiling," he said, clutching his backpack straps. Lena blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "When other people play, the piano sounds like music. But when you play, it sounds like the piano is happy you're here." He rushed away before she could respond, leaving Lena with a warmth she didn't know where to put. She let it sit in her chest, glowing softly. A few days later, Lena received a call from Rita. Her voice was steady, but Lena could hear that she was trying. There was a quiet at the other end of the line that made the truth clear before the words arrived. "I heard from her niece," Rita said gently. "Your friend. She passed peacefully last night." Lena sat down on the floor. The world didn't tilt. It didn't break. It just became still, like a held note that hadn't resolved yet. "I'm so sorry," Rita continued. "I know how much she meant to you." Lena took a breath. Just one. Then another. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. Felt anchored, grounded, like something was holding her. "Do you want me to come by?" Rita asked. "No," Lena said softly. "Not right now, but later, maybe." Rita understood. "Take your time." And Lena? "Yes. You gave her so much. She said that to me more than once." They hung up. Lena stayed on the floor for a long time, not because she couldn't stand, but because the moment felt like it needed to settle. Grief didn't come like a storm. It came like rain that you feel before you see. Slow, steady, honest. Eventually, she stood. She walked to the piano. She placed the charm on top. She touched a single key. Quiet note rang out, pure and soft. And she whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." She didn't cry. Not that day. She didn't need to force anything. Feeling wasn't something she rushed anymore. A week passed. Then another. Her lessons continued. Her music continued. Life didn't pause, but it didn't rush ahead without her either. It moved like a gentle current, and she learned to move with it. Then one afternoon, Lena found another letter in the apartment building's lobby mailbox. It was addressed to her, written in careful handwriting that she recognized even before she touched the envelope. She opened it with slow, reverent hands. "My dear Lena, if this reaches you, it means my journey has carried me somewhere you cannot follow yet. I am not sad about this. I am grateful I made it far enough to meet you. You taught me how to start again. You showed me that music is not about perfection. It is about permission. Permission to feel. Permission to remember. Permission to change. In my will, I have made a small arrangement. Nothing extravagant. But I hope it helps you continue what you have begun. I am leaving you my piano, the upright one in my home. The one my sister and I grew up playing. It is old, but it still holds the echoes of our laughter. I believe it will welcome yours. Let it be yours now. Let it hear new stories. Let it become something again, just as I did. Please do not say goodbye to me. Say thank you to the music. That is where I will always be. With love, Hawthorne. Lena pressed the letter to her chest. She closed her eyes. A tear escaped, just one, sliding down her cheek like a quiet note that needed to be heard. She did not cry because of loss. She cried because of fullness. Later that month, the piano arrived at Lena's house. It took 3 neighbors, a moving dolly, and a lot of teamwork to get it inside. When they set it down in the living room, her parents looked at the instrument like it was more than wood and strings. They looked at it like it was a visitor. Lena sat at the bench. She placed her hands on the keys. The piano felt different from the others she had played. Felt like memory, like history, like gratitude. She played the melody, theirs, then her song. Then she played something new, something that wasn't written down yet. Something in progress, something honest, something like a prayer or maybe a promise. She realized something then. Inheritance wasn't always money, or property, or objects. Sometimes inheritance was belief. Sometimes it was courage. Sometimes it was the echo of kindness, left in your hands. And Lena had inherited all of it. She began to write again. More music, more fragments, more ideas. But now she didn't rush to finish anything. She allowed the music to grow at its own pace. Some pieces took days. Some took weeks. Some might never be finished. That didn't scare her anymore, because she understood now. Beginnings matter too. On a bright morning months later, Rita invited Lena to the community center for a small event, an open house for new members. Lena agreed to play. She wasn't nervous. She walked to the piano in the familiar room, sat down, and looked at the people gathered, children, parents, elders, strangers who might not stay, strangers who might. And she said, quietly, just loud enough for the microphone, "This song is for everyone who ever thought it was too late to start again." Her fingers moved, the melody rose, and in the audience, someone placed a hand over their heart. Someone closed their eyes. Someone breathed a little easier. Someone remembered something they thought they lost. When the last note faded, Lena didn't wait for applause. She let the silence have its moment. Because silence is part of music too. It is where the song settles. Later, a child approached her. "Is it hard to learn the piano?" the child asked. Lena smiled. "No," she said gently. "The piano is easy. It's believing you can learn that takes practice." The child nodded, absorbing the words like a seed absorbing water. "Can you teach me?" they asked. Lena didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "Come sit with me. We'll start with one note." And so she did. And so it continued. Not as a new beginning, not as an ending, but as a continuation. A melody passed hand to hand, heart to heart, life to life. Like kindness, like inheritance, like music.